Mark Linscott, thank you very much for joining us. At what point do you believe there could be a breakthrough between India and the US? And what is the US looking for exactly at this stage?
Well, that is the big question. When might we see a breakthrough? Many of us had hoped that would come in recent days in the run-up to these tariffs. Of course, that didn't happen. I do think that there are discussions behind the scenes, that there are some efforts being made to find a pathway forward. But, you know, in terms of timing, it's just really unpredictable. That's true of almost everything, every policy coming out of the Trump administration. So it could be days, it could be weeks. It's just hard to say. But for the moment, the tariffs are in place. They will have significant impacts, and hopefully we will see a resolution relatively soon.
You know, I just want to read out what Scott Bessent has told Fox News a short while back, Mark. He said, this is a very complicated relationship. Trump and Modi have a very good relationship at that level. This is not just over Russian oil. The Indians came in very early after Liberation Day to start negotiating over tariffs, and we still don't have a deal. I thought we would have a deal in May or June, and this would be possibly one of the early deals, and they kind of typed us along in terms of negotiations. There is also an aspect of Russian crude oil purchases, which they have been profiteering on. I think at the end of the day, we will come together. Do these statements indicate to you that this 25% additional tariff will be set aside sometime in the next few months? Tariffs will not stay at the 50% level?
I think so. That is a positive comment. It suggests a window of opportunity for the two sides to get together and resolve the issue with Russian oil purchases, come to a mutual understanding. I think both leaders need a win here. They will have to calculate what is the approach they can both offer that will provide a win for each side. But I think it was very constructive that Secretary Bessent referred back to the trade negotiations. They've been on ice in recent weeks, ever since we had President Trump's posts on Truth Social about purchases of Russian oil. So I think it's a positive signal that he made that reference. But what is critical at this point in time? This isn't going to be resolved at negotiator level. The two leaders need to be directly involved, and they each need a win in terms of an outcome here.
Right. Now, what do you think is the US looking for at this stage? Because even today, officials in the government continue to say that we are talking to the US to put a pause on the 25% additional tariff. But at the end of the day, this is not about trade. This is not about Russian oil. What is this about, Mark, according to you? Because we are given to understand that somehow an in-principle trade agreement had been agreed upon between India and US officials sometime in July. And that could have been at around 15% or lower. What has gone wrong? Where is the gap? Where is the problem currently?
Well, it's hard to say. I wouldn't necessarily agree with the idea that this is not at all about trade or purchases of Russian oil. Obviously, they've been the trigger points for the tariffs, and they are relevant. And reaching some kind of understanding on both those fronts will be important in seeing a reduction in tariffs that are applied to India. But that said, it's clear that emotion and frustration has been experienced on both sides, and unfortunately, I think those are factors dictating the situation we are in now. Hopefully, cooler heads will prevail. There will be, some exploration of compromises, perhaps some understanding on future purchases of Russian oil and U.S. oil in ways that are also reflective of Indian interests, and a trade deal. That the two sides were close on a trade deal, but President Trump has been involved in every single trade deal with every single trading partner that's been announced so far. So I think that there's a little bit more work to be done on the trade front to get to a lower tariff, a lower reciprocal tariff, ideally in the 15% range, whether it's on industrial tariffs or on certain agriculture commodities. I don't think necessarily the most sensitive agricultural commodities, but it seems clear that there's still a little more work to be done on the trade front as well.
You know, one of the points that USISPF had made to us, in fact, Mukesh Aghi had said this in an interview earlier this week, that they've been urging the White House to put a pause on the additional tariff on India to give room for negotiations. Now, that period has passed, Mark, because the tariff has come into effect now. It's going to stay. The intent has been made clear and the intent has been implemented. What would be the USISPF recommendation to the White House and the US government now, considering these tariffs are in place, negotiations are on?
Well, let me be clear. I'm not speaking as an advisor with USISPF at this point. I'm providing my perspectives as a former U.S. trade negotiator at the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative. And I think the advice to the White House is to seize the moment. The leverage has been used, but that leverage will slip away. And this is not in U.S. interest to have a 50% tariff on India. It will not resolve trade concerns. It will not solve the trade deficit, will not bring manufacturing back to the United States. But what it will do is cripple this very important relationship. So it's important to get it back on track, and that is very much in the long-term interest of the United States. I think that should be clear in the internal deliberations that are going on in the Trump administration at this point in time.
Right. I would also ask you about the pushback from the US industry. Now, India is a major exporting partner for the United States, and US is a big partner for India as well. Do you expect a pushback from US businesses as well in the coming months, Mark?
Well, US businesses have been cautious, to say the least. I don't think there's a great deal of enthusiasm across many sectors in U.S. industry that for the tariffs. The reciprocal tariffs that have been applied to many countries, the tariffs associated with Section 232, which have been justified on national security grounds. That the tariffs now that the additional tariffs now that will apply to India. I don't think there's enthusiasm for those measures. At the same time, there is wariness about being too vocal in expressing concerns about those tariffs. So I don't think we'll see a notable pushback from industry, but I am sure that there are some concerns that this is a bit too chaotic and it's spinning out of control, and it's affecting our trade relationships and it's affecting our strategic relationships. I do think that is an enduring concern of U.S. industry.
Right. Mark, what's your sense? Even if this 25% additional tariff is set aside, will the 25% reciprocal tariff remain until and unless we show more ambition in the trade deal with the U.S.?
Yeah, I think we should be seeing the situation in two pieces. That the latest development is the 25% tariff associated with India's purchases of Russian oil, and it's pretty clear that needs to be resolved first. I don't see any likelihood of a big package all at once, which involves the Russian oil purchases and the trade aspects. I think this will probably be sequential, or will likely have to be sequential, with the latest 25% tariff resolved initially, and then moving to the trade package, and ideally finding some path forward there to have a lower reciprocal tariff along the lines of what was done with the EU, with Japan, with Korea, at a 15% level. So it's probably going to take some weeks to work this all out. But again, I am hopeful, given Secretary Bessent's comments earlier today, that there is a window of opportunity here.
Right. What would be your message to the Indian government at this stage? We have been making this point to the US that India-US energy ties are growing. We've already bought $7 billion worth of oil and gas. This could be over $14 billion. How do we now navigate the Trump administration and Donald Trump here onwards? There is some sort of hope that both leaders may meet at the UNGA sidelines, but that's a hope. There is no confirmation from the Indian side on whether the Prime Minister is even going there. But what would be your advice to the Indian side at this juncture?
Yeah, and just to provide my final perspective on this, I would advise take a deep breath. Of course, emotions are running high. There is a feeling that the measures, the tariffs are unfair. They single out India, but I think find creative ways to move forward. The relationship remains compelling. There has got to be space for a compromise here and continue those conversations. Some diplomacy, even if it's quiet diplomacy, to find a path forward. Don't double down on Russia. Don't double down on China. The time is, this is the moment to move forward.
All right. Mark Linscott, thank you very much for joining us and explaining to us where things stand at the moment and how important it is for the White House to seize the moment and not use these 50% tariffs against India any further.